2014, there's some really interesting industry trends that I think are going to change this business, especially over the next year to two. But I think, and especially when we start talking about 4K, I think it's going to happen faster than people said maybe HD would have happened. You know, when HD first came out, we talked about it, we saw it, I first saw it at NAB many years ago. And I was like, yeah, someday, years later, we finally saw it. It was a slow industry adoption. I think things are moving so much faster now. We went from shooting on videotape to shooting on flash media to now editing 4K video all in the span of about 4 years. I think 4K will take the show by storm. And I think it's still limited where it needs to be. Small screens don't need 4K, but look at the booths that are introducing 90 and 95 and 100 and 105 inch screens. They're going to want content that looks just as dynamic and crisp on those large screens as a 1080 would look, say, on a smaller screen. I realize distance cures the difference between 1080 and 4K. They say if you get 20, 30 feet away, you can't tell the difference. I think it's going to be interesting to have people walk up to large screens within 2 or 3 feet and not see pixels and think they're looking out a window. So 4K is something that's coming and coming quickly. I also think that with 4K, the editing workflow is already here. People's Avid equipment, Final Cut equipment, things like that are cutting 4K as we speak. So there's not going to have to be this huge adoption of the technology. There will be a lot of people who just demand to see 4K. Another interesting trend that we're seeing, in fact, starting to use at Bass Pro Shops is interactive video. Digital signage, dynamic digital signage, things that are just talking to you from a distance, that's fine, it's going to be here for a long time. But what we're seeing is people want to touch. I remember I was at the DSE show 2 years ago, and there were fingerprints on every screen in the place, and most of them were touch screens. People have a longing to reach out and touch. Recently, we started working with some of the new capacitance touch tablets. It's a very iPad-like experience in the sense that it's fluid, it moves very quickly. We're working on developing with some software developers touch experiences that allow people to experience dynamic digital signage on their terms. I want to touch it, I want to control it, I want to rewind it, I want to see it again. So I think it changes fundamentally how, in certain applications, digital signage will work in venues. Not for everyone, but certainly in retail. When people have the time, when you've engaged them, when you've caught their attention, they touch it, and now it's on their terms. My role at Bass Pro Shops for the last 28 years has been director of film and video production. It started out in a very traditional sense, 3/4 inch videotape and editing the old-fashioned way. Digital signage was something that we inherited. It was literally just given to us, and they said, go put content on these screens. Well, we've done TV commercials for the last 20 years, so we'll just put TV commercials on. We realize now that was missed opportunity. We really didn't have a clue what we were doing with that. We realized very quickly that television commercials and digital signage are as far apart as a print ad is to a television screen, and we had to use those very differently. It's one of the things I discovered by coming to my first DSE show 4 years ago was to think very differently about how to use this medium. So it's caused a revolution in how we're going to be using signage in our stores. Traditionally, we weren't real keen on moving video signs in our stores. The admonition was, we don't want to look like a casino. We want to look like an outdoor world. We're starting to understand that through the use of the right content, especially if it's on a larger screen, a video wall, and we have aspirational vistas of the great outdoors, taking a kid fishing, things like that, that it actually complements our environment. So we're doing it very carefully. We're doing it with a motive in mind. We've understood the importance of creating a content strategy to name our objectives before we ever even begin to create the stuff that's going to be on the screens. I think that's what will be the difference between success and failure. Honestly, 5 years ago, I said we should pull digital signage out of our showrooms. 2.5 years ago, I said, I'm going to pull digital signage out of our showrooms. Luckily, my boss said, no, you're not. In fact, in the next 45 days, I want it reinvented. So We fired our digital signage vendor. We went out on a hunt to find somebody that understood more of what we were talking about. We found them. We couldn't be more pleased. And now that we're working with Interactive, we think that it's a whole kind of bold new step into a good customer experience. At the end of the day, at Bass Pro Shops, we are all about customer experience. Whether you buy anything or not, we want you to enjoy your time and find an aspirational release for your outdoor pursuits. At Bass Pro Shops right now, we have about 200 screens. That averages out to about 2 to 3 screens per store. The reason is because it's not something that we don't build our stores to have digital signage and people to come watch TV. But we see that expansion starting to happen in 2014, certainly by 2015. Digital signage in the right environment, as an end cap, as a replacement for the traditional all-in-one DVD TV combo, something that not only for practical reasons because it lasts longer, it's commercial grade, but I can sit in my office and push it, content to it, and I can also measure its effectiveness more directly than I ever could, say, with a DVD. I think the key to success in retail, certainly speaking from our standpoint at Bass Pro Shops, is to always have that objective first. What is it that we're trying to accomplish? And then how can we complement our space before we just start to roll out signage for the sake of signage? And even though prices are coming down on a lot of equipment, it's still expensive when you think about 65, 70 stores. There are so many sources that kind of tell me what's going on, but the industry is still built around vendors who want to surprise you. They want to introduce something new. I heard last night that there were going to be over 50 new innovative releases introduced in 2014. I want to go find out what those are, because if I don't know, I don't know. So DSE for us is a discovery. I don't bring many of my team because we are so diverse in what we do. So while I lead a team of people, I'm also kind of the spearhead for the digital signage initiatives. I have other team members who will go to other shows that are unrelated directly to digital signage, maybe directly related to video production. But it's just the right size show. It's not too large. In the 2 days here, I can get around and speak to almost every booth. I can explore, I can learn. I really come here to discover by hopefully remembering, keep the mouth shut, keep the ears open, and learn. Take a lot of notes, and then I go back and I complement the visit with research back to someone's website, checking out references. One of the questions that I've been asked is, do I come here to buy? Not necessarily. For me, it's more see, touch, learn. There's also a great complement to the educational opportunities that are available. My first DSE, that's why I came. I came out a day early. I didn't even realize the show wasn't open. It was all about sit in a seminar and learn. But I took something like 28 pages of notes. I was learning from people who had walked before me, who had blazed the trail of don't do this, do that. This was invaluable to me at the time. It saved Bass Pro Shops a ton of money later, because I was able to say, oh no, we don't want to do that. I heard from this guy who was with Lowe's that they did this and they didn't like that, and it saved us. So I really encourage people to look at the educational reasons to be here. Get here a day early and sit in that all-day seminar, learn from those. And then, of course, now I'm speaking at the event, and I'm hoping that I can share some of my boots on the ground experience with that person who hasn't been there yet. Earlier I talked about missed opportunity. The phrase I think in business is opportunity cost. We've lost opportunity because we didn't necessarily know what we were doing. We're learning, and I don't pretend to say we know it all, but we're learning, and now it's time for us to share and give back with that. I was humbled and honored to be selected as a speaker for the DSE 2014. I think I've got something to share. I'm going to be talking about the fundamentals of content, but it was interesting because while I thought about font style and cool colors fall back, all these little content rules that you can learn in a design book, the description for the course then said, and how to develop a successful content strategy. And I said, okay, I'm going to have to Google that. I knew what it was, but I didn't want to let somebody down. a successful content strategy is where you start before you ever pull out the first pencil and draw on a piece of paper to get your initial concept. So my seminar will definitely talk about the basics of content, the fundamentals of content, the rules that you should follow unless you know the rules well enough to break them. But I'm also going to spend a fair bit of time talking about the importance of establishing, number one, from a business standpoint, your objective, to determine if you're able to engage and how, and only then do we launch Photoshop or After Effects or edit on our Avid and start to create content. I feel that people who attend this seminar should be able to come away with one goal, and that is to change the way they think about content and content design. We've had a digital signage network for about 10 years. I've been in production for almost 30 years. If I take those experiences and I boil it into a couple of tips for somebody who's saying, I've just been told to roll out a digital signage network. If you don't know anything about it and it's January, then get to this show in February or March of next year. If you do know a little bit about it or you can't get to this show, then find a consultant. And find a consultant that is industry agnostic, somebody who won't push you towards brand A or brand B or brand C. In fact, the very first question a consultant should ask you, if they're worth their salt, is, I don't want to hear how many screens you need, I don't want to hear what you plan to put on it, I want to know, what is your objective? Why do you have a digital signage system? And you'll need to be able to answer that. That gets back to the whole content strategy that I'm going to be talking about. Because if you can't say, I want a digital signage system that will do A, B, C, then you don't know that you need 25, 55-inch Samsung screens. You might think that's what you need, but when you define that objective with a good consultant, you might find out that that's indeed not the case. My tip, based on my experiences in the digital signage world, number one, find a good consultant that's industry agnostic, that won't lead you down the wrong path. They'll ask you good questions to lead you to where you need to be. You know, if I could share one tip, just one tip, on what would make content more effective, think about your audience. Think about how long they're actually in front of that screen. They're not there to sit on a couch and watch television. We used to think that way. We would put up 2-minute pieces and think people would watch it. The effectiveness was nearly zero. I think that the old adage of 3 seconds, 4 steps, 5 words. The best billboard copy in the world is 5 words, maybe 7. If you think about your digital signage that way, that's going to make it better. One of the biggest challenges that I think faces our industry today is that, and I understand the motive, it's profit, but people want to push a solution to you right away before they ever stop to listen to what it is that you need. You've got to establish that first question. What is your objective? Why are you putting in a digital signage system? If you're a mom and pop with one screen, why are you getting it? People used to come to me when I was consulting a lot with web design and say, I need a website. And I said, I'm not sure you do. They said, well, don't you do website design? Yes, I do. Well, don't you want to sell me a website? Not necessarily. Because if it's not right for you, it's not right for you. And I used to talk more clients out of a website than into a website. I think the same thing can happen with digital signage. If you can't say, fundamentally, why you need digital signage, then you shouldn't be doing it. Communication with the vendors in this business would be a better tool for better long-term business. You know, it's a sad fact that many digital signage systems fail. And I think that the basis of that failure, the high percentage, is that they didn't start from a business perspective and say, why is it that we need this and how will it help our business? If they would start there, they would probably end up with a better solution, probably save money on the hardware and software, and ultimately their networks would not just survive but thrive.